Hello everyone, Miss Danielle here with Johnson County 4-H, and I'm excited to share this month's baking class recipe with you guys. So, this month we're going to be making banana bread. So I had some bananas at home that were starting to go bad, and you can see they have some brown spots on them. So I really wanted to use these up and not waste them, and banana bread is a quick and easy recipe to do that with. And most of the ingredients that we're going to have or need for this recipe, most of us will have on hand. So before we get in the kitchen and start measuring and mixing our ingredients, we need to make sure that if we have long hair, to go ahead and tie that back. We don't want to get any hair in our food. And we need to make sure that we have a clean workspace and clean hands. So make sure your workspace is cleared off and clean, and then wash your hands. We'll gather our ingredients and we'll start on our recipe. So the ingredients that we're going to need is a half a cup of butter, softened. And you can soften that butter in the microwave for about 20 to 30 seconds, depending on your microwave power. But you don't want it fully melted, just kind of softened. 1 cup of packed brown sugar, 2 eggs, 1 tablespoon of vanilla, 4 ripe bananas, mashed, and these will be medium-sized bananas. So if they're really large bananas, you may only need 3 of them. 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 cup of chopped nuts, which is optional. If you don't like nuts, then you can leave them out. Equipment. So what are you going to need? You're going to need 2 medium to large size mixing bowls, a measuring spoon and measuring cups in the measurements on the recipe, listed in the recipe page. You can use an electric mixer or a mixing spoon. The electric mixer makes things go a little quicker, but if you don't have one, a mixing spoon is just fine. A spatula and a loaf pan. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and preheat our oven to 350 degrees. So we want to make sure our oven is ready to bake when our batter is ready to go in the oven. So go ahead and preheat your oven. Make sure it's heating up to 350. Then we're going to get one of the medium bowls out, and we're going to cream the butter and the sugar in that bowl. So as you can see in the center picture, my butter was not melted, and it could have been a little softer. I have more of a crumbly texture rather than a cream, but either is fine, and your recipe will turn out. You do want to melt it a little bit though, or soften it. You don't want to melt it, just soften. Then we're going to stir in the eggs. So we're going to mix in the eggs just until they're combined. We don't want to overbeat this. The next step is to mash our bananas. So I do like to wait to peel the bananas until I'm ready to mash them and mix them in the recipe. And this just keeps them from turning brown. So I just put them in a bowl and use a fork. Some people have a masher, which is fine, but a fork works just as well for me. They do not have to be perfectly smooth. You just don't want large chunks of banana. You want it to be mashed up kind of real small pieces. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to stir in the vanilla and our bananas. So we're going to add in our vanilla extract and our bananas into our mashed bananas into our recipe. And then on the next step, we're going to move on to our dry ingredients. So these 3 ingredients are going to be mixed in a separate bowl. We want to measure out our flour, our baking powder, and our salt into a separate bowl. And I do like to stir or whisk these up just to evenly mix the dry ingredients before we combine them with the wet ingredients. Also, another little tip for you is I like to separate my ingredients. So if I have dry ingredients and wet ingredients, I like to separate them in my workspace so I don't measure them into the wrong bowl. And then when I'm finished with an ingredient, I do like to go ahead and put it away or move it out of my workspace so that I know I'm finished with that ingredient. So after we have our dry ingredients measured out, we want to mix the banana mixture and the flour mixture together. And we want to stir these just until they're combined. So we can do this with our spatula or mixing spoon. And so when you stir these in, you're going to notice that it may take some stirring to get that flour fully incorporated. But at the end, your batter is going to look a little lumpy from the bananas, but it should not have clumps of dried flour in it. It should be thoroughly mixed. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and get our loaf pan ready. So we're going to go ahead and spray it with nonstick cooking spray. Spray the sides and the bottom evenly, and you don't want it dripping with cooking spray, but you do want a good coating so that your banana bread won't stick to your pan. If you want to include the nuts, you can go ahead and stir them in the batter before you pour it into the loaf pan so they're evenly mixed. So you can stir that in your batter. If you choose not to include nuts, just pour your batter into your 5 by 8 inch loaf pan, and then you're going to slide that into your preheated oven and bake at 350 degrees for 1 hour. Now keep in mind that some ovens do cook a little differently, so as our appliances age, they may bake hotter, they may bake a little cooler, they may not be exactly that temperature. So it is important to use the toothpick test. So insert a toothpick in the center of your banana bread, and when the toothpick comes out clean, so there's no batter stuck to it, it means that your banana bread or whatever your dessert, whatever you're baking, is finished and is ready to come out of the oven. So go ahead and make sure that you check it with a toothpick in the very center of the loaf, just to make sure that it is fully cooked. Once you have removed your banana bread from the oven, you want to let it cool for about 5 to 10 minutes in the loaf pan before turning it out onto a wire rack. So this just gives it time to kind of cool down a little bit and not get stuck to the edges of the pan. And then you want to turn it out onto a wire rack. Now, if you don't have a cooling rack, that's okay, but make sure that you have wax paper or parchment paper down so the heat from your loaf will not cause it to stick to the surface. Once it is fully cooled, so it's cool to the touch, then you can wrap it up and put it away. Now we always kind of like to slice ours and eat a little bit while it's still nice and warm, but you want to store this wrapped in plastic or in an airtight container, and you only want to slice it as you eat it. You don't want to slice the whole loaf and then store it because it will dry out. So any air that gets to it will dry it out and cause it to be crumbly and spoil faster. Same thing with wrapping it up while it's too hot. It will trap in heat and moisture and cause your loaf to get soggy if you wrap it up too soon. So I hope that you have enjoyed this month's recipe and that you have fun making your very own banana bread at home. Let us know how it turns out and stay tuned for next month's recipe.